Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. Let's switch these cameras and make sure they work. All's well. See you guys at 10 o'clock.
Check, 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 check. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. This makes me feel really short. Like I know I'm short already, but. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Check, 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 check. That's a couple minute warning, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a minute or two. Check, 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 check. Echo, 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 echo. Echo, echo, echo. Are we live? Ooh, getting loud for us. Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. We're going to start this meeting this morning in a good way. My name is Councillor Jesse Herkimer. I'm a member of Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I'm getting a bit of feedback up here too, just by the way. Just so it doesn't, once we start drumming and singing, she doesn't get too squealy in here. A little bit of reverb. But. I'll sing a Sublime song for you. Alrighty. I hope everyone had good travel in this morning. I know we had a bit of a snow day on campus here yesterday, which I hope everybody took in the good time with their friends and family and people close to home to them. Had time with the kids and whatnot. I know I did, and it was fun. We built a snowman and a barn out of snow. Otis built himself a cow, which was, I thought, interesting. So I had to build him a barn for the cow. No, it's back off. Check, check. Check, check, check. Oh.
You gotta point it towards your face, Marcus.
Check, 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 check. Check. Ah. I don't know this stuff. I'm not a Navy guy.
You are. You literally worked here.
This is all new.
Okay, wait. Test, test, test. No, that's not loud. Test, test. You're doing it? Well, you didn't say you were doing it, so don't yell at me. Test, test. Can you hear me? You just got to hold it directly against your mouth.
Is that better? Can everyone hear me now? Awesome. Do you want me to tell my whole snow day story again, or are we good? I think we'll just carry on with the day because we're already after 10 o'clock. This morning here, I'm just going to change the agenda around a little bit. Victim Services is going to go from the end of the list to the beginning of it. They have other items that they need to take care of today. So after our opening from Knowledge Keeper, Andrea King, we are going to move into that and then on with the audit. So if I could please ask Andrea to come up and open us up, I'd be thankful for that. Do you want me to hold the mic for you?
Ani Manogazap. Chiriad Wijid Miguan and Nishnabé Quaid and Dijnakas, Megazadodam, Michisagia the Credit and Donjaba, Nishnabé, Quaid and Dow. For those of you that don't know who I am, my English name is Andrea King. I am Max and Karen's daughter and Lloyd and Margaret's granddaughter. I am honored to open us up in a good way. I'm going to start with a gratitude song. I was thinking we had this great big space in the middle and we could actually start in a circle. Does anyone want to join me in the middle in an actual circle? Could we do that together? Can I entice anybody to come into a circle? There is smudge right here if anyone would like to smudge. The online people can't hear. Someone hold a mic. I can't hold a mic and a drumstick and a rattle and all. We need to do a headset thing. All right. The song I'm going to sing is a gratitude song, and it came to me when I was actually a little girl. Used to have some really difficult thoughts, and I would vocalize. I didn't know what vocalization was, and now it's become a song. And it was my brother Carl Baugh who taught me how to turn it into a song. Carrie was a song carrier. Grateful for Carl Baugh. I'm just going to give some gratitude down to our ancestors that aren't here, but they come and watch us. They know what we're doing, right? They know the work, the good work that's being done, and they know the struggles that we're facing. Away, oh hey, away, oh hey, away, ha. Away, oh hey, away, oh hey, away, ha. Miigwech, mishomens. Miigwech, mishomens. Miigwech no kamas. Miigwech no kamas. Away, 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 Jackie crazy. Miigwech, Jackie crazy. Away, 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 Miigwech gichi manado. Miigwech gichi manado. Away, 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 wah ho ho ho, wah ho ho ho, wah ho ho ho, wah ho ho ho. Agana. Chimigwech.
Chimiwech, Andrea, that we are going to now move into the victim services announcement and a bit of discussion. If there's any questions too, they can follow what they have to say. So I'd like to ask Charlene and Sherry to come up.
This is really, really, really exciting for Sherry and I. And so I'm going to try not to be emotional, and I already am. You know us, Charlene Lovegrove, Sherry McDonald. We've been serving the community for 35 years for victim services. And so we're familiar faces, but we've often had spots in the community, and we've kind of moved around. And so our journey began about a year ago. Almost to the day. Sherry and I were really looking at the service we provided for the last 35 years. And I think we do a really great job with the emergency part of it and the crime part of it. But we were really feeling in our spirit we wanted to do more. And we wanted to look at the bigger, the whole person, and look at their spiritual needs, and really do more of a walking alongside than a once in and out, which is what we were doing. So Sherry and I went on a quest to find a facility, and we were looking all over. What we thought we needed was a school. And so we went to the mayor, we went to the MPP, and of course Leslie is on our board, so we talked a lot with her about it. And we kept hearing from people, you need to talk to the Mississaugas of the Credit. They have a facility. And so I'm saying it's a year ago, so this time, it was November. So we continued on with our search until February, and we came to this room and we did a little update on our programs. And as we were leaving, Jess and Les said, hey, do you have about 15 minutes to come look at a facility? And so we were like, well, we've been hearing about this facility, maybe we should. So the four of us went off to, actually my daughter was with us, the five of us went off to look at the facility. And when we walked in, almost immediately, I was crying, and Jess had goosebumps, and we were all, the four of us really felt like this is a place where victim services could provide a really holistic spot for the community, where they could receive victim services, but not only that, it could be a community touch point for when people have needs, and more of a sense of just sharing life together at all times, and that we would be able to have that component. So we journeyed on, and so we will be opening a healing lodge and temporary short-term stay housing in your new facility on Highway 6, which we are so very excited about. So we've been working behind the scenes. I guess, when did we move in? November 1st? I think it was about 2 weeks before that, but yeah. And so we've been doing, looking at the security and all those kind of things, and all of our policies and how do we get going. And for years we've been hearing from the community some of the services that they would like to have in their own community and not have to travel for. And so victim services, although we'll be managing the space, we are in partnership with many other service providers as well as the community. So we're just kind of getting our feet under us currently and trying to get beds and blankets and desks and that kind of thing. But we want to have community consultation. We want to know what you're doing out there, the good things you're doing, and how we can partner. We envision seeing medicines growing on the property, and food growing, and canning, bringing community together for canning, and all those times we can spend together and share. And so that's kind of, I know that there's lots of things out there. Some of the dreams are, maybe a seniors aquatic thing that we could do, COPD clinics. And I mean, there's no end to what we could possibly do in the facility. It lends itself to so many wonderful things. And it's our dream that it won't be an institution. It'll be like a home where people come and feel comfortable and safe to be served. So I think that's all I have to say, unless anybody has any questions of us. Six in the highway, or 6 in first line. Do you want to?
Yeah.
You go ahead.
It's the new property that we acquired at 4136 Highway 6 there. So this is something that we have, Leslie and I and the team at Victim Services have been working on behind the scenes for a little while. That there's been a lot of hoops to jump through, I guess I'll say, to put it politically correct. But these ladies have went to the moon and back for us in a good way. And this is something very exciting for our community to have in our community for us, and services that are going to be being offered. Also, too, with that, we will come the new year, now that it's out there and it's officially been announced, there will be community meetings about this. We will be taking input from community of what's wanted, what's seen to be done there, the programming that's hoped to be run, so on and so forth. And then also I'll add to it as well, it's not a for free thing either. There is a rent service that's being charged. They're a not-for-profit, so everything runs through funding, government funding and whatnot, where it's putting money back into the First Nations. We've had meetings with political leaders right up the chain, from municipal to provincial to federal, where we brought them in, where we've lobbied for dollars to help facilitate this in our community. So it's been a lot of work and a big thing, and I'd like to ask the room just to give these ladies a round of applause, because it has been a lot of work. Miigwech, there's Kleenex on your table. Good stuff. So next up here, we'll call Tabitha King and Darren Renee up to give our financial audit for the 24-25 F. I'd also like to show a lot of gratitude and hard work to Darren and Tabitha. Over this past, it feels like 10 years, but it's only been 10 months, that they have another team that's went to the moon and back for us in a good way, where they have put the hard work forward and completed audits. They have brought financials back into the realm of somewhat understanding, and there's been a lot of hard work and dedication put in for our First Nation. So as they come up, I'd also like to ask you to give them a round of applause.
Ani, good morning. Tabitha King, Chief Financial Officer for MCFN. I was just officially hired on at the end of May 2025 this year. Yes, correct. When I came on, it was, feet to the ground and going. Just keep in mind, we have completed 3 audits this year. So, yes. I mean, I can't say thank you enough to my team. I've built my team. I have good, well-rounded staff, lots of training, lots of mentorship that I'm providing. Just really hoping and providing mentorship and training to even the directors of programs, so we can all be on the same page to move forward. And thank you to MMP. Darren's team has been a huge help, especially they've been deep into it with all the turnover over the last couple of years, so I can't thank you enough, Darren. I'm calling him constantly and just trying to get caught up as fast as I can as well, just to take over the reins again and say, you can do the auditor perspective now, because management has it now. So this is Darren from MMP.
Thank you, Tabitha. So Darren, my name is Darren Rennie from M&P. I'm the engagement partner on the external audit process, and really that external audit process is required by ISK as part of maintaining that required guidelines, as well as it's just a good process in terms of making sure those financial statements that management's responsible for are in good order, reliable, and you can use it to make informative decisions. So that's really the purpose behind the audit process. Are we anticipating getting the slide deck open? Yeah, I'll just keep talking a little bit more about that, right? So we'll get into it in the slides in terms of when our audit report was released for March 31, 2025, which is the fiscal year. I believe it was late September 2025. So if you zoom out, a couple of years ago, right? For many reasons, there was a lot of turnover in finance. There was the COVID years, et cetera, and these audits were kind of falling behind, right? And like sort of Tabitha and Jesse mentioned, we've effectively got 3 years caught up in a year, and that's a combination of Tabitha growing the team and having some continuity there. That's really it's a two-way relationship, right? So we'll get into it in the slides when they're up. But really, the audit process starts with the finance team, the accounting team, doing the bookkeeping, doing all the day-to-day accounting, internal controls, et cetera. And from there, we get the records, and our job is kind of like you want to think about like a house inspection, right? The house inspection being after the house is built, someone has to inspect the house and say it's in good order, and it's ready to be relied upon and move into. Really, that's what the auditor's process is. So we're supposed to come in towards, after the books are done and do our external audit process. And then historically, we were kind of helping out getting things caught up, right? So we'll just kind of flip through. I think everyone has I think people have the copy of the printout in front of them. So I'll just flip through and tell you which page I'm on. So I'll flip to the third page, which is responsibility for the audit process. That's kind of what I was speaking about. Really, there's three parties involved. So this is the page that has management, chief and counsel, and auditors in three different colors on it. And again, like I said, it starts with management. They're responsible for the accounting, the bookkeeping, giving us access to information. And then we prepare financial statements in accordance with a standard set of accounting rules called public sector accounting standards. And that's just, that's to ensure you have a consistent rule setting that makes your financial statements comparable and consistent across other communities. So that's management's process. And then chief and counsel is involved with, many things, but, from a financial reporting lens, they're the oversight to management's responsibilities. They review and approve the financial statements. So once we're done and we're done, working with management, they're responsible for reviewing it, asking us questions, making sure they're happy with the layout, the presentation, no disclosures, that sort of thing. And then they also are assigned with appointing and selecting the external auditor. And then us at the bottom there in red. I don't know why I picked red. It kind of implies we're bad, but we're I guess I've been out of good colors. So, what do we do? So like I said, we come in at the end. We follow a set of accounting audit standards called Canadian Audit Standards. Again, just kind of outlines how we're supposed to conduct an audit. Again, making sure we're doing enough work and a consistent set of rules. We must be independent. So that's an important rule. We can't, be invested in MCFN. We can't be related to the, council at MCFN and key management. And then what do? We assess what are the risk areas in the audit. We develop the audit approach. We assess internal controls. If there are any weaknesses, we have to dig deeper in that area. And then we complete our audit testing. So important to note, it's a sample-based approach. For those of you, haven't heard that before, that just means we're not looking at 100% of transactions. So, there'd be 1 million transactions, and any audit, if we want to do 1 million transactions, the effort and the time and the dollar value attached to that just wouldn't really make sense. So all audits are typically going to be sample based, where you focus on risk areas and spend some time in higher risk areas, less time in other risk areas. We don't make financial decisions or replace management. And at the end of the day, we provide what's called an audit opinion on those financial statements. So flipping ahead here. So that kind of shows it in a different way. So it starts with management, doing the bookkeeping, preparing statements, schedules. Auditors come in, do their work, formulate our draft opinion. We meet with chief and counsel, and ultimately they approve the financial statements. Or, if we need to go back to council earlier, we would if there was circumstances to warrant that. So how did things go for 2025? As I mentioned, we issued our audit opinion in September 23, 2025, which effectively brings the community's statements up to up to date. I think it's been 5 years since we were last up to date for all those reasons we mentioned before. We're issuing what's called a clean, unqualified audit opinion, so that's the highest level of assurance we can provide in Canada. That essentially means these statements are good, accurate, can be relied upon. It's the audit opinion you want to have. We use this concept on the second bullet point there, going concern. Going concern just means, are we mismanaged? Are we running out of money? Or is there a risk of running out of money? And we're happy to mention that there's no concerns with respect to that. As we'll get to in a second, the community has adequate cash resources to do its good work, and so on and so forth. And then happy to report no concerns or indications of fraud during our audit process. So that's kind of the audit process, audit results, and then next few slides are really just some really kind of high level financial overview slides. So, just recognize that, these are pretty zoomed out. Obviously, there's a lot of numbers that make up all these figures, which, I might, know a little bit about them, but probably between me and Tabitha, we could probably help get you those answers, if there's any questions on that down the road. So inside of these, they're called consolidated financial statements, just meaning it's an aggregation of anything that the band owns. So we have things broken down between council administration, public works, housing, new credit variety and gas store, but not included are the trusts. So that's just kind of how the accounting rules work. So there's investments parked in these trusts, and these investments will not show on these consolidated statements. However, when the trust earns and allocates income and pays a distribution to MCFN, we see that as revenue. So that's just kind of how the accounting shakes out there. So the first slide is really just, summarizing the assets. So assets are at a point in time being March 31, 2025. What do we own? These are things such as cash, investments, accounts receivable, investments in our business enterprises such as MCBC. Capital assets is a big one. So your buildings, infrastructure, equipment, furniture, that sort of thing. So slide here at the top, you can see we've grown our total assets up to 138 million. Up from 127 million in 2024. So, growth is typically a good thing, means we have resources to deploy and do the work that we do. The biggest one in the bottom right corner, tangible capital assets, 38.7% of that 138 million, which it makes sense. Again, that's been sort of growing as we buy more land, property, invest in roads, that sort of thing. We do have a decent amount of cash resources, 27%, the yellow on the left. And then some portfolio investments. So again, those are investments not in the trust. Those are separate, just investments. Excess cash is kind of, been set aside and earning some income of 16% in green there. So good amount of liquidity. And now that I think, you're caught up in terms of the financial records, that helps, management, finance know what's there, what do we have to set aside to cover our liabilities, and what can we do with other things. So obviously that's an operational decision, but I think, speaking with council and management in the past, it's when you're working 1 to 2 years behind, you don't really know what you have available to do with it, right? So this kind of gives you a sense of, we're more up to date now and some of those things as well. And the next slide is really just liabilities. So on our balance sheet, right, we have our assets, things we own, and the liabilities, things we owe and haven't paid, or we haven't earned. And the big things there are deferred revenue. So deferred revenue is in blue here, 66%. So the best way to think about deferred revenue is we got money from, usually it's ISK is a big one, but we have to spend that in certain areas to meet ISK's requirements. So we got the money now, but we actually still have to spend it. And usually, depending on the type of funding, you might have a year to spend it, you have 5 years to spend it, you might have to reallocate it between programs. Not a bad thing to have that, just means we haven't deployed it yet. And then there's other smaller things. We have some CMHC debt of 3.8% for some of the CMHC housing programs there, and some accounts payable for operations, payroll, that sort of thing that are outstanding at year end and typically clear out within a month or so. So when we take our assets and we subtract our liabilities, we have what's called accumulated surplus or equity. If you think about if you had a house and you had a mortgage on it, that's kind of what this accumulated surplus is. So when you take assets less liabilities, you get accumulated surplus. So what's left over? What's our kind of net worth sitting in the community? And we've grown from 103 million to 110 million. Generally speaking, this growing is a good thing. We're not being reckless with our assets. And we kind of break it down into a few things there. Of that 110 million, about just under half is that yellow amount, the 47% invested in capital assets. So again, we've parked up some of our capital in these long-term capital assets. Capital assets don't get expensed immediately. They get amortized over time because they provide value typically beyond 1 year. We have some money set aside in government business enterprises like MCBC, so that's about 8%, that's the green. Some other general reserves, about 1% of red. And then the blue is kind of this sort of unrestricted. There's, some of that's going to be covering your ongoing liabilities, but sort of that's kind of, that's where, we talked about how there's $30 million of cash, et cetera. And I recognize it's a big number, but obviously the community has to do a lot with it. But that's, if you think about it, that's sort of there's money there that could go to different initiatives. So that's how I'd like to put that general blue unrestricted net equity we kind of have sitting at the community at March 31. And then we flip over to the income statement. So the income statement is what did we earn and what did we pay over the past 12 months. So balance sheet was at a point in time. What do we own? What do we owe? And income statement is what do we earned. So starting with revenues, money received or receivable. Typically, government funding is a big thing. OFNLP. We talked about the trust income, Toronto Purchase Trust, Community Trust, and then there's the business enterprise as well that we pick up revenue from. So total revenue pretty consistent year over year. Just under 68 million at the top there, just over 68 million in 2024. Some of that's going to go up and down just depending on different funding initiatives. We can see a big chunk of that is the yellow 46.7% on the left side there. So again, that's predominantly Health Canada, the Ministry of Education, that sort of thing. And then in the green on the bottom right, that's, we've called it other net funding received 26%. That's sort of, I want to call it your own source funding, other sort of funding that's not coming from those government sources and trusts. So a good balance there. And then Toronto Purchase Trust contributed about 15% of that 68 million this past year. So again, the Toronto Purchase Trust has investments depending on how those investments do. There's a formula and it pushes the income over to MCFN. And then Community Trust has a similar mechanism there. It's about 2%. MCBC is the business enterprise increase there, 4%, just above the green. So that's the MCBC. How does it, MCBC, when it does well, we pick up our ownership of that on our revenue as well. So that's ticking away there and growing and doing well. OFNLP is the other one there, blue, at 4%. And I think the last sort of summary here is expenses. So what did we spend our money and what are all those various programs this past year? So pretty consistent total expenditures incurred in 2025 at the top, 57.5 million, a little bit up from 57.1 million. We can see this is, again, macro view. There's obviously numbers build these general buckets. These are just sort of your general programs that align with the actual underlying audited statements. You see education's a big component there, bottom or top left. 23% of that 57 million is going towards education, tuition, that sort of thing. Community funds, 22%. So that would include your wellness payments, that sort of thing. Always like to mention in red there, council administration, 16%. That's not 16% going to running council. That's council and administration. There's salaries. The finance team's going to be in there. All sorts of things. So obviously macro view of just kind of how those buckets are being split between the different programs. Obviously if there's questions on any of those details, we can help get you some of the details there, because it's just kind of showing the overall theme on where the capital is being deployed. That's it. Any thoughts or questions? Again, I can appreciate that's the macro view, kind of taking in the audited statements and simplifying it a bit for visual presentation. I see Tabitha is up here as well. Do you have something to say, or? Tag teaming. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, so if there are any questions, just put your hand up and I'll come around with the microphone.
Financial statements, very exciting.
I'd also like to thank Darren for putting this together. We've tried to, as we all know how interesting numbers are, we tried to break it down and give it a bit more of an appealing look at it, that it wasn't just numbers on a page, so people with the pie graphs and the diagrams, so that we could have a bit better of an easier of an understanding of it.
And I think if there's ever feedback on what would work better presentation wise, we're trying to always welcome to take that in. It's always trying to get the right information across in the right means and methods. So happy for feedback as well.
I have a question. Holy smokes, that's loud. You're not that loud. This mic is. At any rate, I'm Carolyn King, for those who are listening outside, and that you mentioned that there was $1 million above last year. Is that what I heard you say? And so my question is like, where was that? I don't see any big activity going on. You know, we haven't built a new road, and did we hire more people or did we spend more money?
Sorry, was the question $1 million more revenue this year?
I thought that's what I heard you say.
Yeah, it looks like there's pretty consistent revenue, slightly down. I'd say about $900,000 less revenue in total, but I think in general, right, some of these revenues are going to be assigned for specific purposes. But that being said, you know, there is cash in the bank for general purposes that, you know, I think operationally some decisions could be made on that. Yeah. If I go to the assets. So assets have 138 million total assets, of which 27% is cash at a bank account. Again, this is at March 31. It could be different, you know, November. But there is some unrestricted cash available for, you know, decision making if decisions want to be made on where that should be going.
Question for you. Are legal fees included in this for the cost of the lawyers to be involved in the governance, a breakdown of what's getting paid out for legal fees? On which panel here?
So legal fees are wrapped in across the First Nation, right? So a lot of them are going to be sitting in the professional fees when you go to the expense side.
It would be good to see what is spent and how much is spent in each area.
Yeah, so I think if we go back to the expense side here, right? So there's two kind of presentations here, and we only have one here today as being the program view, but there is a separate schedule in the audited schedule that has the I'll call it expenses by nature. So it would have total professional fees, total salaries, total, you know, wellness payments. So we do in the full audited statements, which we can get you a copy of, schedule. Yeah, so I understand the statements are on the website as well, so we can definitely get you that afterwards as well, but there is the full audit statements would have all that information as well. Both by program, so within here we say we have council administration, we have housing, there's sub-schedules at the back of the full audit statements that would say within each of those, what's the professional fees? Professional fees would include, mostly, it's usually mostly legal. But then there's another schedule that just has, across all these programs, what's just the total professional fees. So.
The reason I ask is because some of the reserves are being milked by lawyers, ridiculous fees, just to handle governance. So it's good for everybody to see how much is being spent.
Are there any other questions from the crowd, or is there any online? We'll go one back in the back.
Welcome, Tabitha. I didn't know you were the financial officer. Right on. Yes, I have a question. Pardon my ignorance, but all this numbers and all this says nothing to me. But as a senior citizen, and I see the expenses and the money come in on page, I don't know what that page is, but I'm very interested in the health department, and I'm very interested in social services. I'm interested in these different departments. And my question, has a senior with no background in numbers and accounting, what interests me is when you roll this out, are we as a member allowed to see, for example, the cultural department got 10 million, what they spent the 10 million on? The health got 20 million. How does that roll out for me as a member? Come from the top to the member. Are we allowed to see that And the other question I have about these audits is how far back do they go? And as a member here, can we see what actually was brought in, what went out, tailored down to the different departments?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So kind of similar to the previous comment. So this here is summarizing a deeper set of audited financial statements. So on those full audit statements, which I believe should be available on the website, and probably for the past 10 years, or if not, they definitely do exist, audited statements. There is schedules at the back of those statements. So these are like 50-page financial statements, which we didn't want to read word for word today to respect everyone's time. But there is a schedule that would have health and a separate schedule that would have social services on the full statements. And it would show total revenue earned for social services. And then it would say total expenditures. So and when I say total, I mean all the details for salaries, again, programming, supplies, all these things, the breakdown and total expenditures. And it would say the surplus or deficit that that program ran for that year. Important to note, those statements aren't going to include capital assets. There'd be usually there's a sentence underneath the schedule that would say we bought 300 grand of capital assets. That's going to amortize over time. But so I think to answer your question, there is the more details on revenue and expenditures by, say, social services, education, that shows more breakdown. Now that's still going to aggregate up, so it'll say the salaries is call it $1 million for simple illustration. It won't say here's the people that made up the 10 million. That would be, finance would have to talk to you about that. Does that sort of give you a little bit of indication? Good, thanks.
Alrighty, does anyone have anything else? If not, we'll take a 10-minute break. Any hands? Oh, I got one right here.
I feel like I'm going to make a fool of myself. So looking at the 2024 expenditures and then revenue, it's theoretically an additional revenue of 11.8 million coming in. Is that my understanding?
So you said there's additional revenue of what amount, you think?
So for the 2024, if you just subtract the expenditures from the revenue.
Oh, okay, you're saying surplus, so revenue less expenditures. Okay, yeah, 68.8, 57, yeah, so about, call it 10 or 11 million. Yep, I follow what you're...
little 11.8.
Yep.
And so the accumulated surplus from 2024 to 2025 is a difference of about almost 8.
Yep.
So where does that 11.8 to 7 million? So to me, there's like 4 million that's not accounted for. Like what happened there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a valid question. It's sort of how the accounting shakes out, but it's largely the capital assets. So when we look at revenues and expenses, for accounting purposes, we can't deduct 100% of the capital assets. So if we buy, the land beside Highway 6 for, was it $7 million? $7 million. That doesn't get deducted here in expenditures. So some of it might get deducted over time, but that kind of creates this. It looks like a big surplus, but the full audited statements would show surplus, and then there's actually less buying capital assets. So there is like a kind of a timing difference there. I appreciate I don't have that in front of you, but I can definitely state that definitely happy that the accounting does work. There's no way to kind of make magic happen here and hide $4 million, but there is some reconciling things just for how the accounting works, which I get operationally. It's hard to kind of envision how does that actually work, but a lot of the big differences here are going to be capital assets, which can be anywhere between 3 and 10 million a year. Yeah. So Tabitha reminded me on Schedule 1 to the full audited statements, you'd see the capital asset schedule, and then if you look for the additions line, you would see what also was spent on capital assets. So if you want to kind of take the true, I'll call it burn rate, I'd take the revenues of, say, 68 million in 2024, subtract the expenditures of 57 million, call that 11 million, and then subtract the capital assets on that schedule. So if you call that another 10 million, you know, we're at maybe $1 million surplus. So, yeah, that's sort of I call it the adjusted net income figure. It's a good question, because I think when you look at this, you only get part of the answer. Yeah. Yeah.
Leo, you got a question?
No, I don't, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, back in the good old days, it was just all cash basis, and if you spent the money, you just expense it, and then it's really easy to understand it. The only problem with that is it doesn't show the full picture, because capital assets are supposed to be benefiting you for 10, 20, 30 years, depending on the asset.
So, my name is Dale, and I just have a question regarding the consolidated financial statement on page 17. It talks about long-term debt to CMHC, so I'm assuming that's for housing. So, if people don't pay their debt, then does the nation have to go in the hole trying to pay that debt back for them because it's through CMHC?
Yeah, so the CMHC program, it's specific housing unit, so that would be separate from call it the loans we give band members. So I think with the CMHC debt, that would be required either way. To answer your question, if band members don't pay their loans, which probably another note on that amount, probably an earlier note, that's sort of a separate issue. But yeah, separate from the long-term debt.
She asked, so what happens to the difference of funds?
If the community members that have loans don't make their payments,
Correct.
then I believe the agreements, and again, I'm kind of speaking off memory, is there technically is the right to take the house, but I think my understanding is that's not, not typically enforced. But I think there's a legally binding agreement on when these loans are provided. You have to take a look at what those parameters are. But theoretically, the extreme case is the community is out of the funds, right? So if we gave you a $300,000 mortgage, you don't make the payments. We as a community would have bad debt on our books, and we'd be out of pocket there. So. Yeah, it's definitely an important housing question, because, some might be up to date, some might be falling behind. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh. Our communications lead has one.
So online, we have a question from Amanda. She asks, why were 3 years of audits needed at once? Shouldn't they be completed yearly?
Yeah. No, I think they definitely should be completed yearly. The reason we had to kind of push, call it 3 through in a year's time, is because they fell behind. Predominantly, I'd say for 2 reasons. During, I think, the COVID years, the accounting team was just falling behind, I think, on maintaining and keeping up to date. And then finance team had a lot of turnover. Again, I'm kind of speaking approximately, but between 2022 and 2024, especially before Tabitha's time, there was, I think there was 3 to 4 sets of finance managers, right? So whenever you have that happen, the books and the quality of the books and being up to date is just going to lag a little bit behind, right? Doesn't mean that operationally the books were being done. It's just those kind of final year-end adjusting entries fell behind, and therefore, us as auditors, we could only do so much when the house was called half built. So it's largely falling behind, and we had to get those done for the right reasons. So we were playing catch up. Yeah. Normally you'd have 1 a year, and it's due end of yeah. And end of July is when, so it's March year end, and it's due end of July. So so now we're caught up. So. And it just emphasizing it is hard to do 3 in 1 year. Like, you're really straining operational, finance team, and then, us as auditors. We'll do what we got to do to help support our clients. But we're really happy we got it caught up. So I know council is as well. Any other
I'm giving it time to ask for another question because as soon as I start to walk away and think we're done, somebody else puts their hand up. So I'm giving it a minute to see if anybody throws a hand up in the crowd. Are there any other questions surrounding this is F25 audit? Oh, there we go.
Again, this is a very simple question. If your office is hired to oversee the audits, and maybe it was already answered and I never heard it, why is there, I mean, I'm just thinking about the way Canada Revenue treats me. Why is there no pressure for you to get these done every year so we can all be up to date and share it with the community instead of having to go backtrack and catch up? If you're the overseer, like, don't you have a legal responsibility to say, okay, let's get with this?
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. I'd start by saying we don't have the same authority that CRA has, right? The CRA, if you're behind, they will just claw your money back from, like, they have extreme powers. We're hired by council to provide the external audit reporting process, and we can only really work as quickly as the books and records are. So we can tell management, you're behind, this is the implications. We could tell council, you're behind, here's the implications. And ultimately, I'll call it the only party that can kind of create fear is if someone like ISK says you're not compliant, we're gonna withhold funding or claw back funding. That's kind of the big piece that sort of motivates people. But like in our position, and I can tell you, we work with lots of Indigenous communities, we work with lots of Indigenous trusts, we work with communities or organizations outside of Indigenous communities, and it's not uncommon to fall behind for various reasons. And really it goes back to, well, what's the implication? Like, how do we force something to be done? And really, if you think about it, I go back to the house inspector analogy, right? Is if you hire a house inspector to inspect your house and the house isn't built, the housing inspector can't, like, what can they really do? It has to be on someone wants that house and needs that house, and if they don't have that house, they have no alternative. And that's where ISK threatening to withhold your funding is the real ultimate, I think, threat that motivates. Yeah. But definitely by all means, I think we all would have liked to have it done on time, and I think that's just good for everyone, balancing schedules, et cetera. But yeah, that's I think the overall thesis there.
I just had a question in relation to MCBC. Does the full audit show how much we've given them and how much has been returned in revenue? Thanks.
So can you repeat that? So MCBC is, there's a separate audit on MCBC, which MMP has also been the auditors for, and the accounting it's not consolidated because it gets treated as what we call the equity method, meaning the net income of MCBC gets picked up as revenue. So we won't have their assets and liabilities on our books. We won't have their revenues and expenses on their books, but we will have their net revenue picked up on our income statement, and it was approximately 4% here. It's this business enterprise line. So it's 4% of 68 million, whatever that math is there, but I think there's a few $1 million they made in 2025.
Will we have will we have a line item showing how much we've invested in MCBC for past fiscal or past 3 fiscals, for that sake?
Yeah, there's a on the full audit statements, there is a schedule for investments in business enterprises, and there is I'll call it a continuity schedule that would show opening carrying value of the net investment, plus new contributions like actual cash injected, plus the net income pickup. So it would have 2 years in any given audit statements. It would show contributions. I don't know if there was contributions in fiscal 2025. I don't think there was any new contribution in 25. I think 24 and prior there was some ongoing arrangement with council and MCFN helping getting it started. Yeah, but there is some information there on note looks like note 9 there of MCBC. Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll take a 10-minute break or so, and if you think of something during that 10 minutes, we'll get it after the break.
Do the wrap up after.
Okay, everybody, I'll give you another minute or so here to get settled back into your seats, and then we'll fire things back up. Hello. So we're going to bring Darren and Tabitha back up. We're going to have a little bit more discussion, conversation, and questions if anything came up over the break.
Yeah, just a couple closing remarks from me, and really I just want to talk. We talked a little bit about it at the table about the progress that we MCFN made on catching these audits up, and the other thing we thought kind of overlooked on the initial presentation was what's going on in other communities and what's going on in others, financial statements, compliance, and again MMP. So we're really large provider of Indigenous audit services and services in general across Canada. And I can speak to the broader situation, and most communities are not up to date on their 2025 audit. Like we have, again, I won't say names, but there's definitely 4 communities that we work with here in Waterloo. Or I work out of the Waterloo office, but we service 4 communities on the audit side from our Waterloo office, and 3 of them, of the 4, MCFM being one of them, are the only ones that are up to date, and the other ones aren't even starting the 2025 audit process. So, just want to emphasize that, while there has been, a catch-up period, and more could have been done to catch it up maybe quicker, but we're in a pretty good spot now. We're caught up, and other communities are still catching up. And there's all those reasons we talked about, right? The bookkeeping fell behind, turnover. It's hard to get good people sometimes to do the accounting process, right? So just want to emphasize, there was, it is a pretty good position that your finance team and records are in at this point. And it was a lot of effort to get it caught up, but I think, we can all be proud of the effort that was put in by the finance team, by council, to get the right people in and make those hiring decisions, so.
And I will just add, so for fiscal 26, we are on cue to wrap up our audit by the end of July, which we should be. So I'm really pushing and updating our processes, making sure the departments are bringing information forward. We're doing updates. We just did a 6-month update on this fiscal. So we're looking already ahead, right? I want them to be on the ball rather than behind. So looking forward, like that's where we're projecting, is always we need to be looking at a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, so we can look at our capital planning, look at what priorities we need to, right? If we have our community development plan, what can we start next year? What can we start in 2 years? What funding do we have coming down? So we're really starting to look forward now. And I just have a lot of processes in place, and from here on out, that's my plan. Let's see. Yeah, is there anything else? Was there any more questions?
So on page 33 of the Lands Membership and Research, it's got other income, 120,000. Does that include what the Community Trust gives the department to administer the donation policy? And if so, what is it labeled under in the expenses portion? Page 33. Unless it's 23, hold on. No, I think 33. Like, what would the expense be labeled as?
The donations policy, you said?
Yeah, so the Community Trust gives money to Lands Membership and Research to administer the donations policy, but where is it labeled under expenses?
You're going to see that under the administration line.
Oh, okay. Okay, so then what happens if there's dollars remaining?
Yeah, so we do get a lot of funds from the Community Trust, and what will happen, say they got 100,000 given to them in fiscal 25, but the donation policy only dispersed 50,000 of it. The 50,000 would actually be moved to fiscal 26 to spend. And then we also have to do reports back to the Community Trust saying that we spent the full funds.
Okay.
And if we didn't spend it, then we would send it back.
Thanks.
Any other questions? You had like 20 minutes to think of some good ones. No? Nobody? Carolyn? Jordan? He's going here.
I don't think this is a question for you guys, but I guess for council that is here, chief and council that is here, or any candidates that are here. But looking at this, it seems to be like the financials are in a good spot, and we're able to kind of visualize where money's being spent, and so I guess moving forward, if we like, just kind of like more of a statement of like thinking about like the visions for community both on and off reserve of where we're going to put money in the future, or whether that's increasing our housing or different areas of interest. I just want to say miigwech for kind of all the work and as well for the presentation.
Yeah, and I'll just respond, like that is what my priority and what my department is responsible for, right? We need to be able to give sound information so those decisions can be made, right? We can't make decisions. It was very hard for the table to make decisions when things are coming up and saying, we need to do this, we need to prioritize this. It was really hard for them to make those decisions to say is like, yeah, we have the funds to do that. So that literally is what our role is, or my department's role is, to make sure we have everything updated where they can say, these are the resources we have, or, right, if they come to us and say, we want to start these 5 projects, how can we roll it out, right? So that's what a lot of my work is going to be doing.
Yeah, I think too that I'll just add to that as well, that from the table side of it a bit, it was for our financials to be in place for the 7-Gen plan, right? So that CPP has went through, it's all been passed, it's the community engagement, everything's happened, it's been put together. So we need to know where our money is to make that process move forward. So now that we have our kind of guiding trail of what the community wants, this allows us to be able to start that process of the 7-Gens. Anyone else? Getting my steps in today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind that the world is changing. Canada's changing based on this new government that's come in under Carney. He basically gave direction across the board to cut 15% across the board over the next 3 years of all First Nation budgets. And we have been in a serious campaign with the Prime Minister's office on this budget. And fortunately, the rebuttal back from First Nations across the country has got it down to 2%. But this budget is 2%. We're gonna find a 2% reduction across the board, which might sound small, but in terms of numbers, it's huge across the board. So we need to keep in mind that the world is changing around us, and our budgets in First Nation communities we're going to have to fight for. This may look much different in the next fiscal when we go over this next year. So I'm just saying that for those council members that may be elected next week, that's the challenges that we have. That's the voice that Claire and I have been out in the field, writing letters in face-to-face meetings, challenging the government with respect to these types of issues that's going on. Personally, I think it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And so we really need to consider the future of First Nations and where we are, how we move in the business factor, and how we move into allowing business development corporations and those things we're entering into. We need to consider that, of what that means for the community, both on and off reserve. We got issues with off reserve members that we want to help the off reserve members. To do that, we need to maintain our financial position. Miigwech.
Sorry, I will just respond to that too, Larry, and that's exactly, but I need to be able to know what the impacts are financially and how that's going to roll out to the First Nation. And for us to be able to look at business development so we're not reliant on federal funding, right? So that's another piece that, from a hierarchy view, that I have to see down, but also listening from the table as to like what's happening in the landscape there across the board.
My English name is Peter Schuler. What steps are being taken to make sure that we don't have a lapse in financial information in the future? I know how important it is to know where your funds are so that you can plan ahead. I was working with another organization, and their financial people made a mistake where the funds they thought they had turned out to be half of what they had. And that really puts the brakes on everything. And so when we have no information for 3 years or 2 years or whatever it is, there should be something in place to make sure that can't happen. And in regards to what Larry said, the world is always changing. There's not something new. And that we have to fight for everything we got, that's not new either. That's just reality. So, if you got a hill to climb, just climb it. You don't need to make a big fuss over it. Just do it. And, that's our reality. It's always been. Ever since 14, whatever, when Stumblebum got here, we've been against this. So, as long as you know what's happening, you can proceed. And the other thing that I think about a lot is when it comes to fiscal responsibility, what do we get out of giving everybody $30,000 bucks? What's the long-term benefit from that? If you take, I don't know what the number was initially, say 138 million, invested at 5% compounded for 5 years, the end result is around 176 million. 10 years, it's almost double. And so if we want to look for long-term financial stability, why didn't we just put all this money from the Toronto Trust, this last one, and the next one, or whatever it comes up, put it into investments and give out a portion of the interest. Not everybody will get a big lump sum, but the money, the capital will be there, and you come to a point where you have enough to start something worthwhile. I mean, this is not really a popular opinion because everybody needs money. But if you think for the future, if you think for the next generations, passing it all out doesn't serve any real great purpose, except for, initial feel good. Maybe somebody goes out and buys a car or whatever. The only way it's going to do any good is if people invested in their housing, something that's not going to rot away or wheels fall off of or whatever. But I think, we need to change the way we think about these kind of things. You need to think about the future. It's easy to say if you have money. If you don't have any money, $30,000 looks like a lot. I'm not saying I got money, but with what little that I've had over the years, you scrimp and save, and eventually you get something. But spending it all, going on a binge, spending money, it's not going to get anything. It's instant gratitude, maybe. But anyway, that's my own 5 cents worth. Can't say 2 cents worth anymore because we don't have pennies. But something to think about, And, if you've never had any money at all, that sounds like a lot of money. If you look back to the Toronto Trust when everybody got $20,000, I was here when they made that announcement, and everybody's brains went to Walmart. The amount of money that we got out of that settlement was way, way, way less than what we should have got. It shouldn't have been an M number, it should have been a B number. But as soon as people waved that money in front of everybody, the majority of people, their brains go to Walmart. What can I buy with that? Not, is that enough? And the government says, okay, if you don't take this, we're going to put you back into court for another 20 years. And so, we take the instant gratification instead of pushing for what the right number should be. But anyway, I can't force anybody to think like me, and probably that's a really good thing. Miigwech.
Miigwech, did you get the question there then, Tab?
Yeah, so just to respond to how we can ensure that these are audits on time, it really comes down to our processes and our procedures, right? And that's what I'm keen on. I'm used to being on time. I will push my team, right? But I'm also giving them the support that they need and the mentorship that they need, the training that they need, right? It would be, if I'm pushing and wanting deliverables, I need to be able to know that they have the tools that they need to succeed as well. I don't want to set people up for failure because that's not going to help me and that's not going to help the First Nation. So I really am a very supportive, supervisor. Leader. There we go. I don't look at myself higher than anybody else. I really do look to my team. I look, they're on the ground day to day. They're my eyes, right? I can't see everything. I can't know everything's going on. So I really look to them and I depend on them. Just like I do with the other senior leaders across the tables. I can't be in every place so it is, just having that open communication, knowing what our priorities, our deliverables are, timelines. It's just really about open communication across the board too.
Thank you.
Renee, a question about the land we bought, across the road there. I have to note that, that was a unplanned event, and we spent $7+ million out of our First Nations money to buy that. And I have to say that I don't disagree with buying it, but the process to buy it. And who knows what we lost by spending $7 million over there. And what are we getting out of it? We haven't had it that long, but when I first seen it up for sale, I thought the First Nation should buy that. And then the next week it was bought. So, it was a very quick decision. In real estate, yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah, either you're going to buy or you're not quickly. At any rate, what are we doing with it?
Okay.
Yeah, this is the finance team. But with that, that's Victim Services was here this morning. The houses that are there, this is the first announcement that was made first thing this morning, that Victim Services is going to be working out of the houses, working with us. Come the new year, there will be community meetings on the programming. They want to do holistic art healing, offer programming through the house there, aqua aerobics. There's lots of partnerships. That was something that we it's been a lot of work behind the scenes. Leslie and I and the team at Victim Services have been definitely lobbying all stages of government for dollars because it's a not-for-profit. And it's seen, even though that they've been functioning for 35 years, it's still seen as a startup because it's branching out into a new endeavor of Victim Services. So I would say in, 10 months now, or 11 months, I guess, we're doing all right. We're pushing to bring stuff here to benefit our First Nation. So the other parts of the property are still, the land is rented. It's generating income. The pig barn is generating income. The shop is generating income. So economically, it's benefiting the First Nation already. There are, money-wise, revenue-wise. So it's already giving back to the First Nations like that. With this new arm of Victim Services, hopefully starting in the new year, we'll start to have there will be community engagement around it of what's going to be offered there and just ideas of what we'd like to see as a community on and off. That benefits everybody because everybody is going to be welcome there. No, it's not reserved yet, land yet. It's in the midst of an aggressive ATR. So, where is that in the audit? Where is the land in the audit?
It's actually...
the revenue.
Oh, it's actually an asset purchase. So you're going to see that in the capital schedule.
Are there any other questions? Online? In the crowd? Thumbs up? Hands up?
I just want to speak to that thought that people are going to spend money irresponsibly. It's not your job to tell people how to spend their finances unless you've spoken to every member to determine that everybody's heading to Walmart. That's not a fair judgment to make for anybody, because I would like to give people credit, and I think there's a lot of common sense and people need it. They could be like a payment away from losing their place to live. Not everybody has cheap rent. Living off the reserve, you're paying anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a month for rent. People with mortgages, with the interest rates rising, now they're paying $200 or $400 more a month. So don't judge people. Let them do what they need to do. It's not your place. Big Witch.
Any other comments around the audit?
It wasn't so much around the audit, but didn't we have that 10, 2, and $2 from the Toronto purchase to purchase land? Wasn't that one of the, so was that where the 7 million came from? Was that 10?
Yeah, so the First Nation does have dollars set aside for community development, land purchases, yes.
Okay. Alrighty, and I have an off-the-wall question, if that's okay. I just noticed that the book that Stacy has out, it says Chief Stacy Laforme. Was that actually paid for by the administration in previous audited dollars?
I'll have to check into that.
Alrighty. Victoria, anything online? Nope. Alrighty. I think then this is another couple people I think that we should give a round of applause for, that over this last 10 months they've done a lot for our First Nation, and I'd like to thank you both. Alrighty, so we have one more thing. We actually are running ahead of schedule for once in a community meeting. So we're gonna have an announcement kind of stuff here about the Rouge from our CAO, Adam McDonald, and then we're gonna have lunch.
Good morning. The most dangerous place I've discovered over my time is the most dangerous place to be is to be between anybody and lunch at a community meeting. So I will keep this brief. As most of you know, we have begun the process through Peace Hills Trust of distributing the Rouge River Valley Tract per capita distribution. Of the just over 2,200 eligible members, I understand 1,784 have now received either an electronic transfer or will be receiving a mailed check based on their preferences over the coming days. That leaves, by my admittedly quick math, just under 500 folks who have not yet received. If any of you are in this room, I invite you to head on over to the website where you can find an online application to go directly to Peace Hills Trust to get your distribution. Or if you prefer the old-fashioned method through paper, you can head down to the Lands and Membership Office during regular business hours, and they'll have a form you can fill out and submit again to Peace Hills Trust to receive your per capita distribution. That's it. That's the whole announcement. Just wanted to make sure that those of you who don't have an opportunity yet, do get the opportunity. And with that, I will turn it back over to Councillor Herkimer, and I'll be out of the way of your lunch. Thank you very, very much.
Alrighty, I'm going to ask Knowledge Keeper Andrea King to come back up and do a prayer for us, and then we will break for lunch. I'd like to thank everybody who joined in online today for not bearing that snow we're getting.
As most of you maybe know, I'm not a language carrier, unfortunately. I pick up just a little bit of language. And praying for me used to be a really difficult thing because I was raised in a church and I didn't resonate with that church. But it's really important that I listen to my elders who have guided me, and it's the gratitude, right? Having that gratitude, and that's a universal. And so I just want to acknowledge that world around us in the way that my elders have taught me. Acknowledging first, of course, those crawlers and the swimmers and the flyers. Acknowledging our plant nations, our tree nation, and the plants that give us our food. Acknowledging the sacrifices of all of the animal life that sacrifices for our well-being as humans. Acknowledging my place in the world, our place in the world as a human, being that last species that was lowered down to the earth, to enjoy the bounty that Creator has provided for us, and acknowledging those that put their hands on the work today to create this food, that have shown up to gather in that good way. All of you that have come today with your passion and your curiosity and your concern for our well-being as a nation. And we are not here to judge. Absolutely, we should not. We need to ensure that we are moving together in a good way and being supportive to each other and empowering. Miigwech, enjoy your food.
Miigwech, Andrea. Okay, everybody, that means mealtime. Let's eat. And say miigwech to Jenny for bringing us our food.